The boardroom was silent until the janitor cleared his throat. Laughter erupted. Let him speak? One exec snorted. What's he going to teach us? How to mop? But from the corner of the room, the paralyzed CEO blinked slowly and whispered, Show me again. No one laughed after that. Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit subscribe for more videos like this. Let's begin. The leather chairs creaked as the executives shuffled into the morning meeting. The tension in the skyscraper's top floor was electric, because today wasn't just a meeting, it was Judgment Day. Layoffs were coming, the stock was falling. The CEO, once a titan of industry, now sat in a specialized motorized wheelchair at the end of the glass table, unmoving. His accident had made headlines. His silence had shaken the company. And now, his top VPs were circling like wolves. I say we cut the lower ranks, barked Martin Delaney, head of operations. Outsourced janitorial, maintenance, clerical, clean sweep. The others nodded eagerly. In the corner, unnoticed, a man in faded work boots was fixing the thermostat. Dark blue uniform, white name patch, Derek, the janitor. No one noticed he'd stopped moving. No one noticed his eyes watching the whiteboard. No one noticed he'd just seen the numbers and silently winced. But the CEO did. He noticed, because he hadn't taken his eyes off Derek since he walked in. Meeting is in session, barked Martin, slamming a pen on the table. Sir, we'll proceed with vote-based consensus, unless you want to speak. The CEO blinked once. Slowly, his vocal cords had been damaged during his accident. He couldn't speak, not unless someone brought the device, but no one had. Martin turned back smugly. Then, it's unanimous. We'll start cuts with janitorial and maintenance. Sorry, but brooms don't boost our shares. That's when Derek spoke. Software firm clear. Actually, the brooms are the only reason this building hasn't burned down. The room froze. A few of the younger execs snorted. One whispered, Did he just talk? Martin rolled his eyes. Excuse me? Derek stood upright, still holding a wrench. You're about to fire 147 people, he said, voice calm. But the numbers on that board are wrong. You're listing $3.2 million in energy expenses. But our building automation system's power draw peaked 3 months ago. Since then, I've reduced consumption by 28% manually. The new number is $2.3 million. How would you know that? Another exec snapped. Derek didn't flinch. Because I fixed it. More laughter, scoffs. The janitor fixed the company's energy problem? He didn't back down. That's one problem. The second is your logistics pipeline in the South Wing. You're losing $200,000 a month on deliveries rerouted because of a busted receiving system. It's not your supplier. It's the sensor grid. I wrote up 3 reports. They were ignored. Martin stood. Okay, let's stop this circus. But that's when the CEO raised his hand. Silence. His fingers trembled as he pointed to his assistant. She rushed over, unlocking a drawer. From it, she pulled out a small white tablet, his voice device. She set it on the table and pressed the mic. The CEO's voice crackled through the speaker, slow, robotic, and chillingly clear. Let him speak. For the first time, everyone turned to face Derek. He looked nervous, but he didn't stutter. I've worked here 7 years. Night shifts, holiday cleanups. I've seen departments rise and fall. What I've learned is this. When a company forgets to look down, it forgets how to stand. Are you implying we're blind? Someone snapped. I'm saying, when the people keeping the lights on speak, maybe don't laugh. He walked over to the whiteboard. erased the logistics loss number, wrote $248,000 per month. Everyone leaned in. He circled a portion of the map on the operations board. Here, Dock 12. The ground-level sensor is stuck. It forces auto-routing to Dock 3, which doubles transit time. I replaced Dock 12's panel last week with a used part I bought myself. Routing normalized for 36 hours, and you gained $14,000 in efficiency. You, what? I paid $39 for the part. The CEO's fingers moved again. His voice buzzed. Show me again. Derek stepped to the touchscreen on the side wall and, with surprising grace, pulled up the building's internal control software. He moved through menus the board hadn't seen in years. Then he tapped into systems they didn't even know were installed. And suddenly, the screen lit up. Live diagnostics, power flow, routing history, camera logs, all coded, all colored, all precise. Derek explained every chart like he'd been born doing it. By the time he was done, the entire boardroom was silent. No one laughed now. I don't have a degree, Derek said quietly. Didn't go to college. But I've spent every night learning because I wanted to matter more than just the mop I held. He looked at the CEO. I wasn't trying to be seen, sir. But if you are, seeing me now, let me help. The CEO stared. Then, for the first time in 6 months, he smiled. Martin looked pale. This doesn't mean anything. We still need... Enough! The robotic voice cut through the air like a blade. Effective immediately. Mr. Derek Harlow is being reassigned. Everyone froze. To what? Martin asked. The CEO replied, my personal advisor and chief of internal systems. As gasps erupted, the CEO wheeled forward until he was face to face with Derek, their eyes locked. Thank you for still caring, the voice whispered. Derek's hands trembled. He simply nodded. And the room, once full of scoffs and superiority, was now filled with respect, and the smallest sound of someone clapping from the intern in the back. The moment Derek stepped out of the boardroom, everything changed. Not just the way people looked at him, the way the building breathed. Security guards who once nodded absently now straightened up when he passed. An intern spilled coffee on herself, trying to open the door for him. And when Derek re-entered the janitor's supply closet, not to clean, but to gather the journals where he'd scribbled every system fix, every power surge, every overlooked glitch, it suddenly felt like opening the pages of a war manual, because he hadn't just been fixing leaks. He'd been keeping the company alive while it sleepwalked. Meanwhile, on the top floor, Martin Delaney wasn't done. He stormed into his private office, slammed the door, and tore his tie loose. A janitor? He hissed, pacing in rage. The cripple thinks a janitor can run diagnostics better than a team of engineers? But his assistant, a woman named Kara, spoke carefully. Sir, the numbers Derek showed us were precise, real, and the CEO was manipulated, Martin snapped, by a nobody, and now that nobody sits 3 floors under me. He turned, narrowing his eyes. Fine, if the janitor wants to play genius, let's see how long he lasts. Downstairs, Derek was greeted by a surprise. The CEO's assistant, Claire, stood outside his closet, holding a folder. You've got a desk now, she smiled awkwardly, and an assistant, and a suit. Derek blinked. A suit? She pointed. Behind her was a garment bag. He ordered it weeks ago. What? Claire shrugged. The day after your first energy report. He read it, didn't say anything, but he must have known. Derek swallowed hard. He saw me before I ever spoke. Claire nodded. He saw everything. In the following days, Derek was no longer the man pushing a mop. He was the guy who rewired the fire systems at 3 a.m. The guy who could walk into the boiler room blindfolded and tell you which pipe whined out of sync. The guy who kept every elevator running, every light flicker-free, every shutdown averted. His first meeting as Chief of Internal Systems left the engineering team stunned. Within 15 minutes, he'd restructured the entire diagnostics plan, removed 12 outdated redundancies, and handed them handwritten notes, color-coded, on things they hadn't noticed in 5 years. Some grumbled. But when they tested his claims, every single one checked out. But upstairs, the whispers began. Who is this guy, really? He's too calm, too smart, too perfect. Is this some stunt? And from the corner office, Martin Delaney watched with a snake's smile. Because he'd already set something in motion. Something dark. Something buried. And it was about to rise. 3 days after Derek's quiet promotion, an anonymous envelope slid under Martin Delaney's office door. Thick, unmarked, sealed tight. He opened it with surgical care, only to freeze. Inside were old security stills, employee files, and a printed email from 7 years ago. Subject line: Janitorial hire, Derek Harlow, manual approval required, criminal background pending. Martin's eyes narrowed. He flipped to the last page. There, in faded ink: battery, assault, night of 2009. Fought off 3 men behind a bar. No charges filed. Claimed self-defense. Served 30 days for disturbing peace. He leaned back slowly in his chair, then smiled. Oh, Derek. Meanwhile, in the sub-basement, Derek stood beside the CEO's wheelchair. They were alone. The room dim, quiet, humming with old servers in memory. This is where I used to hide, Derek said, voice low. The CEO blinked, watching him carefully. Derek touched a pipe. 7 years ago, I worked nights here. Ate my lunch on this box. Learned every wire. I didn't know anyone upstairs, but I wanted to be more. He hesitated. I didn't think anyone saw me. The CEO's device buzzed to life. I did. Every day. Derek's throat tightened. He nodded slowly. That afternoon, Claire, now Derek's assistant, burst into his office. She looked pale. You need to see this. She placed a manila folder on the table, the same file. Derek read the summary, the fight, the charges, the 30 days. He closed it carefully. I never hid it. Claire looked worried. Someone sent this to the entire board this morning. Upstairs, Martin stood before the executives with a gleam in his eye. Ladies and gentlemen, while we all appreciate Mr. Harlow's janitorial genius, we also have a duty to our shareholders. He tapped the folder. We cannot entrust a man with a record, a man who was hired under unusual circumstances, with internal access to every system in this company. A few nodded, unsure. He's done well, one murmured. And what happens when he flips? Martin countered. What happens when the man you put in charge of your doors, cameras, and energy grid decides you're not worth saving? Silence. Martin pounced. I say we call an emergency vote. Downstairs, Claire ran into the basement again, breathless. Derek, they're voting. Now, without the CEO. He stood slowly. Something in him shifted. I've been patient long enough. 15 minutes later, the elevator dinged. The boardroom's doors opened, and Derek stepped in, wearing the CEO's old gray suit. The room fell silent. He walked to the table. Calm, steady. You're voting on me, he said. That's fair. Let me speak first. Martin scoffed. We don't need a lecture. Derek placed a tablet on the table. Hit play. Security footage. 7 years old. The bar. The alley behind it. 3 men. 1 woman, crying. and Derek stepping in between, taking every blow, protecting her. Claire's voice cracked. She was his sister. Martin flinched. Derek looked each board member in the eye. "I was arrested for saving someone who was being dragged behind a dumpster," he said. "Yes, I threw punches. Yes, I bled. But if it happened again, I wouldn't do a thing differently." The CEO's voice buzzed from behind them. "Neither would I." He'd wheeled himself in. His voice cracked louder. "And if you vote against him, you vote against me." No one voted. Not a single hand rose. Martin sat, stone-faced, boiling. But he didn't say a word, because he knew the janitor hadn't just won their respect, he'd won their fear. 2 weeks passed, and the company? Thriving. Power usage hit an all-time low. Logistics operated like clockwork. The media began whispering about the janitor miracle. But Martin Delaney wasn't done. If reputation didn't break Derek, control would. It began with a simple glitch. At 3:13 a.m., the elevators froze. By 4:06, the AC system spiked to 92 degrees Fahrenheit on floors 12 through 15. At 5 a.m., the fire alarms began to blink. False alerts, random triggers, chaos. Derek jolted awake in his new apartment above the maintenance wing. By 5:02, he was at his terminal. His fingers flew. Override here, manual reroute there. Cooling flow realigned, but then he saw it. A line of rogue code, buried deep in the mainframe. Someone was inside. Someone was trying to shut the building down from within. He tapped into the logs and saw the IP Martin's office. He raced upstairs. But when he burst in, Martin was already standing, arms crossed, smirking. "Looking for something?" he said, waving a flash drive. "You did this?" Martin shrugged. "I just reminded the board what happens when you put power in the wrong hands." "You endangered lives." "No one got hurt," Martin said. "Not yet." Derek's fists clenched, but he didn't swing, not this time. Instead, he turned and walked to the CEO's private office. 10 minutes later, every executive's phone buzzed. Emergency board meeting. Now, and when they arrived, the CEO was waiting. So was Derek. And next to him, security footage. Time-stamped, HD, crystal clear. Martin, plugging in the drive. "You tried to crash our building," Derek said. Calm, clear. "Just to frame me." Martin's mouth opened. But the CEO raised his trembling hand. "You're done." 2 guards stepped forward. Martin's legacy ended in silence. And Derek? He stood taller than ever. But he didn't smile. Because something else had shifted in him now, something deeper than revenge, something dangerously close to purpose. A month later, the building pulsed with a quiet pride. Staff whispered Derek's name with awe now. Not fear, not mockery. The janitor who saved the company. The man who listened even when no one listened to him. The man who fought without fists. But power brings eyes. And soon, recruiters came calling. One company offered him a blank check. Another flew in private to meet him. 2 major competitors wanted him as CTO, with equity. Claire found him on the roof one evening, watching the city glow. "They're offering millions," she said softly. He nodded. "I know." "Are you leaving?" He didn't answer. Because part of him wanted to. The money, the fresh start, the escape. But he looked down. Far below in the courtyard, a woman in a janitor's uniform sat eating a sandwich on a bench. Alone, just like he had. That night, Derek walked into the CEO's private office. "I've made my decision," he said. The CEO blinked once. Derek placed a sealed letter on the desk. Inside, not a resignation, but a plan. a new division, training, inclusion, advancement. For the quiet ones, for the overlooked, for the janitors who fix broken systems while the world isn't watching. Weeks passed. The company didn't just recover, it soared. And now, at every orientation, the story is told of the man in faded boots who saved $1 billion empire with nothing but his voice. And on the lowest floor, next to the maintenance bay, there's a plaque. Everyone laughed when the janitor spoke until the CEO whispered, "Show me again." Derek Harlow, the man who showed us how to listen.